So, TC, a couple of my listeners from Houston, Texas, both in their second marriage, each with grown children who don't get along. Parents have considerable assets. Sizable dispute now brewing among the kids. They needed an estate plan. They heard me talk about the Cordasco Financial Network, partner of Mercer Advisors, and they made the call. Same call I have made. 855-558-3500. The estate planning team kicked into action, created a comprehensive estate plan to help ensure the parents' intentions were met. All the necessary documents were drafted. They saved in legal fees, and they are happy campers. Cordasco Financial Network, trade name owned by Mercer Global Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Andrew Garrett, Inc., not affiliated with Cordasco Financial Network or Mercer Advisors. Client experiences will vary. Successful outcomes are not guaranteed. Time now for the headlines from Smerconish.com, the newsletter. TC, on top of everything else, in the midst of a crazy, successful but crazy day on Friday at the Unconvention, all of a sudden I start to get word, I guess toward the end of the live radio broadcast, that Joe Rogan has again in a podcast referenced me, or I'm now a part of a Joe Rogan podcast. Joe, by the way, doesn't say my name, despite the fact that he draws material from me.
My theory is that he can't pronounce it. It's the only thing
I could think
of. I could be right.
You might be right.
Yeah, so that was part, I think the way it happened was it was part of the social media report. So we did a social media report, I think in the 10 a.m. hour from the Unconvention.
Yeah,
and
in front of a live crowd.
In front of a live crowd. And then other people started either looking at their phones or had already heard it. And so the way it worked is in commercial breaks, people would shout things out. I mean, it was really
right. Things that they were hearing from the podcast or reading about the podcast.
Exactly.
The guest was Roger Waters. I guess I buried the lead.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that.
The guest was Roger Waters. It is, as the Rogan podcasts tend to be, it's 3 hours long. I have listened to it.
Whoa. You listened to all 3 hours?
I listened to all 3 hours this weekend as I dismantled, yesterday specifically, as I dismantled my garden.
That carrot was very impressive.
Excuse me? I was taking down the garden. I had a hell of a harvest yesterday, by the way.
No, I was actually really serious.
Yeah, that was my carrots and peppers.
I think
there are a lot of jokes
had room
in here.
To grow.
There were some eggs that I'd retrieved from the chickens, and you saw on my Instagram account, I took a photograph of that basket.
It was like you were homesteading.
Okay, so it was a gorgeous day.
And that's what you were listening to.
That's what I was listening to.
All 3 hours.
I've got my iPhone in my pocket. I've got my buds in. I'm breaking a sweat on a gorgeous day, and I am listening to Roger Waters trashing me on Joe Rogan.
Okay, so let's hear it.
So, look, I of course listened to it because I've always found him to be an intriguing guy. He's a mad genius. I've said this to you. He's a madman.
Which one?
He's a forget Rogan. I'm talking about Waters.
I got it.
He is a madman, and he's a genius musically, and I've enjoyed being in his company because I enjoy conversation and dialogue. There's no doubt that I am in his head, right? There's no doubt I'm in his head. You've heard...
From what I have heard, he keeps bringing you up.
You've heard the cuts that I requested you grab, and I'm going to air in just a moment.
But what's so funny is that Joe Rogan would mention, someone from CNN, and he would bring up your full name. That was the funny part of it.
Well, people are about to hear that.
Right.
So I don't know, does he blame me for unsold tickets?
I think he blames you for a whole host of things.
This tour of his, which I have seen, is a huge business, as I have explained. There are hundreds of people touring with him. He's got a big nut that he needs to cover each and every night. When I went to interview him, I went to a hotel room to have a COVID test. Which one is it? The PCR test, like the more serious of them, and had to await the results before I would be given access to him. I was with Lily, who's my makeup artist from CNN.
Yeah.
And the point is that there was a room set aside in the hotel because they had like a traveling crew of nearly 300 people. Hey, those people cost a lot of dough.
Right.
So everyone
needs to be paid.
Right. Roger doesn't want to portray himself as the big businessman, but he is.
Right.
This is a big business that he's got going.
Capitalism at its finest.
Not only the tour is a financial consideration, I'm sure, but also, and this is in Smerconish.com, the newsletter today, from today's Financial Times, the $500 million plus sale of Pink Floyd's music catalog has hit a wall. with the auction delayed by months of arguing between band members over tax assets, and bassist Roger Waters claims that he's on an assassination hit list in Ukraine. Well, all of this began with the interview that I did first week of August with Roger Waters, because, of course, his political views have always been out there and he's been vocal, but it was the airing on CNN International of the things that he said to me that really put him in the eye of this particular storm. Remember the facts of this. This is really important. We sat down on a Friday for 30 minutes. A conversation initiated, I should also point out, by his people. They're two women who work with Roger who are lovely. I so have enjoyed dealing. I'll say only their first names. Fran and Kate. They are my points of contact. They arranged prior conversations that I had with Roger, and they arranged this one. At the end of the conversation, TC, for which they were present, just picture the scene. We're in a hotel ballroom. It's quite a spectacular setting because there's a wall of glass behind us. You know, PJ and Randy and the creative team, my team, are doing the video work on contract for CNN.
Yep.
We speak for about 30 minutes, and at the end of the conversation, you know, both among Roger, but more importantly among the people who work with him in a PR context, was, hey, we're going to see you tomorrow night at the concert. You're going to come to the box, right? I had purchased my own tickets to take my sons to see Roger Waters. You know, I accepted nothing from them, but they said, come by the box. Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. That was the end of the communications that I had, that I had with them. I then was able to get aired on CNN about 6.5 minutes of that 30-minute conversation. Roger had joked to me during the course of the conversation that we had, oh, you're only going to air 4 minutes of this. I fought for every minute I could get.
I know you did.
6.5 minutes is a long segment on my CNN program. And then after it aired, he immediately tweeted, based on the airing from CNN, he put it out there.
He retweeted it.
Correct. Thank you. I'm tongue-tied.
No worries.
And then I dropped all of it, all 27 minutes, on my YouTube channel.
Immediately.
Where it remains.
Yes, you can watch the whole thing.
Yeah, and the point is, I was proud of the product.
Right.
I wanted, if I had something to hide, I would never have released all 27 minutes, because I'm giving an invitation to hardcore Roger fans to compare what aired with the totality of it. Go look at it all.
Without any controversy. This was prior to the controversy.
Right. One other thing that I just remembered. So pleased was I with the final product that I sent him a note. Hey man, we got 6.5 minutes on. I think you're going to love it, because I believed I had treated him fairly. This was not a case.
You got his views out. That's what he wanted.
This was not a case. This was not a case of me doing the interview and then going about my business and leaving it to my CNN producers. Oh, no.
No,
Roger, if you were treated unfairly in what aired, it's on me. Yeah. Because I played a direct role in saying, you got to keep this, you got to keep this, you got to keep this. But I didn't treat him unfairly. But then came the blowback when people started to hear what he said about Ukraine, what he said about Russia, what he said about his excuse for China. I mean, Roger takes the side of like every despot and dictator in the world, and then blames the West and the United States for all that ails us. Anyway, so I went to the show Saturday night, again, with my head held high. The following, we did the interview on a Friday. It aired on Saturday morning. That night, I'm proud to be there. Yeah, I'm the guy who interviewed Roger. That's right. Wasn't it a great interview and a great conversation? Then comes all the blowback. A lot of stories were then written about what Roger had to say. Notice he never said that he was misquoted. How could he? He was on camera. He then goes on stage the following Wednesday in Columbus, Ohio, and now it's all obvious. He tells the audience, first of all, the place apparently was half full. Okay, and I if you listen to what he said, he draws a connection between the lack of full capacity, lack of a sellout, and the CNN interview, and says that the tape was edited to make him look like a prick. So he's blaming me for the lack of attendance in Ohio.
So the obvious fact is we didn't sell out, but We didn't sell out, if you see what I mean. I just wrote that. And we never will sell out, either. We will, however much they cut up my interviews on CNN to make me look like a prick.
Right, no matter how much they cut off my interviews on CNN to make me look like a prick. So Roger Waters thinks that I set out, I guess, to make him look like a prick. Nothing could be further from the truth. He's amped up his comments. Since then, he's written letters, including to Zelensky's wife. I'm still not sure why he writes directly to Putin, but in the case of Zelensky, he writes to Zelensky's wife. I didn't hear that, if that was explained in the Rogan interview. But I imagine then he goes down to Texas, he's going to perform in Austin, and he sits down with Rogan in part so that he can rehab, all the damage that has been done since the interview that I did with him back on August the 6th. In the midst of my gardening, I may have missed something, but I think he brings me up 4 or 5 times. Like 3 minutes into the podcast, Rogan tells him that Rogan appreciated the interview that Waters had done on CNN, and Roger brings me up by name. Listen.
You're in the middle of a lot of things. You've got your tour. You've got a lot of controversy going on. I really enjoyed that conversation that you had with CNN, because that kind of conversation is rare to see on air, and see someone as informed as you are, to have these opinions and express them so honestly and bravely.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting conversation.
Well, I'd known Michael a bit for a year or two. And he actually, my last kind of engagement with him, with Michael Smerconish, I'm talking about, who we write the interview, was when I was playing in Miami a few years ago, and the local Jewish community decided that I shouldn't be allowed to use local school children to sing Another Brick in the Wall Part 2.
That's all true. Now, he now goes down a rabbit hole telling the story of Miami, but, TC, he never connects it back to me.
Okay, so...
He never connects it back to me. He goes off on a tangent.
He did say my last exchange,
It was a year or two ago.
Clear.
Okay, Roger, we've been in COVID for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Come on, you know that. It was 5 years ago.
The Miami interview was 5 years ago?
It was 2017.
Wow.
It was 2017. Roger is on tour. I've been invited to interview him and to interview him on tour, which was something I was very excited about doing. And it's true, I went down to Miami to do the interview, and the shit hits the fan because the mayor, I think, of North Miami Beach protests against Roger, says he's an anti-Semite, and leans on school kids through, I think, some city-affiliated charity for, as he puts it, impoverished youth, denies them the opportunity to perform Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which I thought was BS, okay? So what I did for Roger was I interviewed him. I provided him a forum, I think on my Facebook page. I'm almost positive on my Facebook page. I did it backstage before he went out on
I remember.
And I gave him the opportunity to explain his side. I think you can still find that interview.
I'll find it.
Okay?
Yeah.
And he was appreciative of the opportunity that I afforded him to tell his story. I'll tell you something else but he never ties that together in the Joe Rogan interview. I'll tell you something interesting.
Rambling.
Rogan and Waters are two guys very impressed with their own and one another's intellect. But I have to point out that Roger Waters had to explain to Joe Rogan what BDS is. Listen.
So that's always the objection, because I support BDS, and because I have for the last 16 years or so.
BDS?
You know what BDS is: boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
Okay.
No, apparently Joe Rogan doesn't know what BDS is. Joe Rogan, I have to point out, Joe Rogan, when my name was invoked on your program about a month ago, I was said to be not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Really? So then Roger brings me up on another occasion in this Rogan interview by raising a story about his mother and how his mother was insistent that you read, and understand all sides of the story. So this is Roger with Rogan. Then I'll tell you about Roger and me.
I'm going to tell you one more mum story, and then I'll stop about mum, because this is the most important bit. I was 13 years old, I had just gone through a phase where I suddenly realized I was going to die. I don't know if all adolescents have this existential crisis in their early puberty, but I did. And I thought, F me. I'm going to die. This is scary as shit, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. And it might have been that, or it might have been something else. But anyway, something was worrying me, and it was probably more some kind of political thing that I'd latched onto, maybe through her. And she looked at me and she said, all right, I'm going to give you some advice now. Go on then, Mum. All through your life, you're going to be faced with difficult questions, and you're going to have to figure things out. This is my advice. When anything crops up, so it could be Israel, Palestine, it could be anything, it doesn't matter what it is. So you must read. That's what Smerconish was telling me.
Yeah.
He'd only read one side. That's the difference between Michael Smerconish and me. I've tried to look at all sides of these things, so I know a bit more what I'm anyway, she said, read.
Okay,
And
you get it, right? So he's totally turning the tables on something that came out of the interview that I did with him back in August. And here's my recollection, but again, people can watch the full interview, the 27-minute version on my YouTube page. Roger asked me where I get my information. I said, Roger, I read. I read for a living. You've heard me say this before.
I have quoted you
By
on
the
it
time
before.
I get on air, my work is over. I read and try and make myself informed. And then a few minutes later in the interview I did with him, he brings up the lesson of his mother, who said you always need to read all perspectives. And I say to Roger, well, it sounds like your mom agreed with me.
my mother, when I was 13 years old, and stop me if I've told you this story before, I was struggling with something or other, as 13-year-olds do. Maybe it was mortality, but anyway, it probably wasn't. And what my mother said to me was, she said, you're going to have to struggle with stuff all through your life. Difficult questions will come up. When they do, here's my advice. I want you to read everything you can about whatever, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I say she agrees with me. Your mom was a reader. And at that time, it's like, yeah, my mom agrees with you. Okay, just one more. Indulge me one more, because I've been eager to address all of this. Here's the one that hurt, TC. This is the one that cut me to the quick.
I mean, I don't blame you. I have to say,
You've heard it.
I have heard this quote, and my heart dropped.
Yeah. You could say a lot of things.
Oh,
Roger,
this isn't right.
you could say a lot of things about me, but not this.
Intelligent people believe it. That was what was so disturbing about that conversation that you had with that gentleman on CNN.
Right.
Was that was an us versus them conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure Michael Smerconish is a gentleman.
What do you call him?
I certainly wouldn't have him in my club. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no.
That was Groucho Marx.
Well, he's a guy working for a propaganda arm of the Democratic Party.
I know.
I mean, that's what CNN is.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you want to work there, that's what you do.
Right.
You
I'm
know,
just
you wanna be a
working
base-
for the man. I'm no gentleman, and I'm just work according to these two.
According to the Twitter mob, you belong on Fox, so I don't know where that actually puts you.
So Roger,
You're not a gentleman.
with regard to whether I'm a gentleman, can I just remind of a couple of things here? Yeah, I'm the guy who 5 years ago could have stayed out of your dispute in Miami. Instead, I gave you a platform to at least defend yourself. Was that the action of a gentleman? And by the way, thereafter, at the end of the show, TC, Roger has this is kind of cool. He has a drill that he does every concert night with his band. They call it the Golden Trough. And everybody comes and eats and drinks and stays up late.
Fun.
And I was invited to the Golden Trough and sat with Roger for a very candid conversation about politics and also about life, not unlike a conversation he then invited me to join him after a Philadelphia show. We closed the bar at the Rittenhouse one night.
Come on.
The night of a show in Philly, just the two of us now at a table, pounding drinks and sharing lots of details and information about our respective lives. Okay? He's a talker.
Yeah.
Would I ever reveal to you the sum and substance of any of the politics, maybe, but the sum and substance of just our conversations about our lives? Not
No.
a fucking
And you know-
peep.
you know why
Because you
not?
know who doesn't do that? A gentleman. A gentleman.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Roger, my recollection of our time together is pretty sharp. But I mean, I enjoy your the dialogue and the company that
Right.
I've had with him. I'll tell you something else. Thereafter, I encouraged him. He told me a particular story about he and a friend when they were very young and traveling to Beirut. And he told me this wonderful story. Roger, if you're listening to this, it's the story that ends with "they're poor." I'm sure you know the story. They're poor. I'm not going to give it away. And I said to him, TC, you got to write a memoir. You need to write, man. These stories are fabulous.
He's a storyteller.
And thereafter, Roger, you might not remember this, he sent me pages. I loved the story, and he said, I think I've written that. When I said, oh, I'd love to read it, he sent it to me. And I responded and said, this is wonderful. Write a book. Write a book. So one of the revelations of the interview with Rogan is that he explains that during COVID, he wrote a memoir. Now, he'll never give me credit for telling him he needs to write a book, but a gentleman gives that sort of advice.
The encouragement
To
was
a
there.
friend.
That's right. Oh,
Right?
dear. Oh, dear.
Look, I released the whole tape. I treated him fairly. I didn't set him up. It wasn't a hit job. I have no animus toward Roger, despite what he says about me. I regard the man as good company. I've never agreed with all the politics. There's a whole other backstory I can tell you about that. But the world is a far more interesting place with him in it. And I'm just disappointed that this is the way that he now is looking at our limited interactions. That's mostly I'm just disappointed. Yeah, I'm just disappointed in the whole thing because I really think that I did right by him in very difficult circumstances because his own controversial beliefs are at the core of any controversy about Roger Waters, not my treatment of him. And I went to the show and I loved the show. I was able to put the politics that I disagreed with out of my mind and enjoy the music. That's my story of Roger and me. See ya.